Last year when Kimberly Johnson interviewed in the English department, it was like, well, if I say it this way, I'll insult someone else, but it was like a breath of fresh air. It was a wonderful experience to hear her read her poems, which is, Flyleaf of one of her books says, Johnson's poems plunge into an ecstatic world of congregating moths and mountains, of botany, of inclemency, an unsentimental world of natural commotion and expansion that enchants even as it threatens. And we were excited at the possibility of being able to hire her, and we thought we didn't have a chance. So we're very grateful that she has come here. She has published poetry in some of the best journals in the country, including the New Yorker, New England Review, Pequod, Verse, and Xantippe. She has graduate degrees from the Iowa Writers Workshop, Johns Hopkins, and Berkeley. At the University of Iowa, she was asked to write a text for beginning creative writers, the World into Word, Reading and Writing Poetry. Her honors include the Merton Prize for Poetry of the Sacred and the Paris Review Prize for Poetry. But the best thing about her, as you'll find, is the vitality and excitement and diversity of her poems. So I give you Kimberly Johnson.
Thanks very much, John. And hats off to John and the English department for doing all the work to put this fabulous reading series together. I'm glad to see that it's getting lots of attendance. Because of the season, I think I'm going to start off this afternoon with a poem called Autumnal. The woods nearby have ceased their brief deciduous noises. Each shake of branches brings down a hail of walnuts, the air stung with the tang of rotting husks. What is there to do but stay indoors? And where would I go anyway in my summer suit? It takes so much to entertain an audience of one, and the fire does not pull everything to itself, instead gives off a little heat, a little light by which to read. The leaves of the book settle, each word like the first green word sown beneath the winter. I confess that one of the reasons that I took the job at BYU is that I had been living for 6 years in California, which has no weather, and I was traumatized by the unending 70-degree weather. It was too much for me. I need something brutal. I need something better than that. I need snow, and I need to feel like I'm getting pummeled by the elements. So naturally, this is a place where I can get 4 good seasons. And this poem that I'm about to read is a complaint about the weather in California, which I hated, which was always the same. This poem is called This Dial Knew. The flamingo on stem legs sifts fish from dirt, its body a pink bloom above the drainage ditch. South, the scarves of swallow and goose, bands of them, a bolt unrolling, chuffed with flapping. And yet, the roadside lines with pot guts, artless, refugees that from the field the first rain drives, their burrows filled with what the dry ground can't receive. And yet no fall. The crickets slow their shrill flamenco, and yet no fall, no swart dawn, no shear of leaf from twig, no flush of desperate color through the aspen, nor even aspen. Instead, the yucca vaunts stout fans, the citrus scarce can cast its fruit to blossom, and tomatoes blush unfrosted in their pots. What paradise so fierce as this unyielding green? What tyrant finery? I want the shock of winter, of green things lank and damaged. The walkway muddied, wind a hooligan through dead leaves, a hootenanny of branches on the roof as cold air falls brutal from the north. I want to pound my legs to feeling, blood a bristle in my thighs, the patient pain of ice, splendidly entire its assault, declares my certain body, my vital, fatal body. This clemency wants nothing, repudiates me more than flood or famine, more than the blank mercy of snow. Here's a poem that may be familiar in its title to some of you. There's a town called Helper. It's kind of by Price. For those of you who don't know why Helper is called Helper, it's because the trains can't quite make it up the mountain there. It gets a little too steep, so they stop in Helper, and they get another engine to help pull them up the mountain, and then the Helper engine sort of unlatches the train at the top and goes back to Helper. So that's where they get the Helper engine, and that's why it's called Helper. And this poem is also called Helper. Of rock, of razor grass, of standing water tells the town, wherein the rest-bound Rio Grande couples with a second locomotive, crouched and greasy, for the last upthrust of Rocky Mountain. Nightfall, and the engines skirl the incline, past the coal mine and its compressed stars, past Wan Roads, where the aspen alphabet inscribes the hillside, past Sheep Creek, where my father lost his truck in 1980, the sudden blizzard carving an embankment from the road. He felt it slip, heard the suck of mudded tires, saw the sky enlarging, whitened through the windshield, past Thistle, quiet valley town until the mountain flooded down, past Childs' ranch, the pond disturbed by night swimming fish, silver backs to the full moon bared. The railside gravel jumps and glints, the sleepers deepen in their grooves unappreciably. At Diamond Fork, the clamor of uncoupling, the engine fires, grinds, returning light to Helper. You like how I say Sheep Creek there? You can get all the education in the world, but you can't get the hick out of the girl. The poems I've been reading are from my book, Leviathan with a Hook. I'm going to read a few poems from the book that I'm currently working on, which is called, tentatively called, A Metaphorical God. This is called Sonnet. No seduction in the hothouse. Its aisles of deliberate orchids only heave beneath ceiling fans. The horticulturists applaud, her monstrous offspring affront with chromatic perfection, charm in array. But when the orange orchard blossoms, I am ravished. Raptures in the garden? Never once did rows of carrots so well weeded yield a swoon. Beware that flim-flam man the farmer, I grouse in passing, sowing season by season an almanac theology. But when orange blossoms wave in pneumatic arcades, I dither, I coo, I hallelujah. There's this little tiny bird in France. It's about the size of a human toe, and they're illegal to eat. They're called the ortolan. You're not supposed to catch them and kill them and eat them because they're so, well, they're getting more scarce, and also because they're these beautiful little symbols of innocence and perfection, and yet people secretly snag them and eat them all the time. And I'm sort of interested in that. And there's this elaborate ritual that you're supposed to go through when you eat an ortolan. You're supposed to first catch them in nets, and then you put them in a cage and you stuff them. You feed them like crazy with figs for like a month until they're like pear-shaped little birds. And then the method of killing the birds is to drown them in liquor so that their lungs and heart are filled with liquor, so that when they cook them, the brandy the taste of brandy pervades the bird. It's kind of gross. You're all supposed to, because they're such beautiful little symbols of innocence, it's a shame to eat them, so you're supposed to cover your head with a napkin when you eat them so that God can't see you profaning his creation. So this poem is called Ortolan. If with your serviette you cover not your eyes, if gluttonous you swallow hot, if fail to pop the liquored lungs and heart, with what dishonor will you lunch? How loutish you'll be labeled. Belly to the ritual, sirrah, we've had such pains to lay it so, to land such eminent amenities. Plum company, linens broidered with spun gold, the sterling silver chafing dishes of a toe's breadth. Our pâtissiers superb, but our charcuteries divine. Our chefs beside himself, those starch pink carcasses in hand. He claims a high fire seals the herb fields of Provence in crackling skin. A figgy flavor lingers from Morocco in the musculature. A mouthful host to leagues, a moment fatted by long months. This is our illicit joy, this flutter of a whole life on the tongue, this mysterious taste of sky in violet. This is our craving, not their tiny innocence profaned, but we for eating, utterly transformed. Here's another poem about weather. It's called Squall Line. Winter enfolds us, a fabric of tenterhooks. Sunlight from everywhere whitens the room. My south wind, my wingspan, how can we unwinter ourselves? Ice thickens the window, ice anchors the tree. The yellow, exhausted light slips on the surfaces sidewise, a glacier. The pavement is dazzling, zambonied. The wings of the evergreen bend like wings of a rook folded up for the season. My flywheel, my ligament, miles from here, weather is settling noisily onto the shoreline, sun low to leveling, rain horizontal, wind weakens the sea against rock, the black grass blown white, collapsed, a false ocean beside the white ocean. My needle, my calendar, wait there for me. The hemisphere scoured, bleached out, picked over, stiffened and tasting of salt. The earth in its muscular fall from the sun. Everything white. The sound of things only to compass us. North is the airport, south the joinery, ocean westward, east empty of sound. The backing pursues its wet sweep anti-clockwise, rattling brack, knocking hail against slate. I'm knocking at the door, my turbine, my Gulf Stream, dowsing rod, fastness, well water, south wind. I'll read two poems today called Paternoster, which is the Latin name for the Lord's Prayer. This is the first one. This garden is a ruin. The female lacrosse team cleat the turf all day, swatting leaf from stalk, netted staves bent on one white ball. They gulp and shrill their rabble post to post. They do not speak to me. At sundown, taxicabs disgorge their laughing fares. The debutantes pert and pranked for evening. As evening falls, maidens shuck their pinafores, swains unbreech, blanch, babble, and are claimed. They pare and tread and crush the white, thin sprouts. Several shear to woodside, to grapes stretching vine to soil. They clutch at each cluster, stropping branch to point, hands ablush and fumbling, chops dripping, wide devouring eyes. They do not look on me. They are so self-consumed. They tangle in roots, titter and thrill, shameless in the sweet, abundant fall, in the necessary fall. I mentioned before that the book that I'm working on right now is currently called, I think it will be called, A Metaphorical God. I've taken this title from a prose piece by John Donne, one of his devotions upon emergent occasions. So I'm going to read a little from John Donne because, you know, he's John Donne. To give you a little context for where this title comes from. He says, my God, thou art a direct God. May I not say a literal God, a God that wouldst be understood literally, and according to the plain sense of all that thou sayest. But thou art also, Lord, I intend it to thy glory, and let no profane misinterpreter abuse it to thy diminution. Thou art a figurative, a metaphorical God too, a God in whose words there is such a height of figures, such voyages, such peregrinations to fetch remote and precious metaphors, such extensions, such spreadings, such curtains of allegories, such third heavens of hyperboles, so harmonious elocutions, so retired and so reserved expressions, so commanding persuasions, so persuading commandments, such sinews even in thy milk, and such things in thy words, as all profane authors seem of the seed of the serpent that creeps, Thou art the dove that flies. This is a poem called Bad News. Why does the harrispex eye the entrails? Why mutters the dog pacing the porch, the red sun eclipsed to a filament in the sky's belly? The Ouija board jolts and will not spell. Perseids, Leonids, red skies at morning, two-headed calf, blood in the well. Even the tea leaves look bad. They slosh at me balefully, stick against the cup like a flat, khaki message in capital letters, could I but read. Am I to read this spatulamantic squiggle as next week's crash? This playing card as coming plague? What a maddening, a metaphorical god you are, all flounces and periwigs when plainclothes would do. Flutter not these fruitless billets doux before me. I would far prefer to face my fate unfreighted by the parlor game of prophecy. Or give it to me straight, lest my predictable blindsiding blame not poor oracle me, but your coquetry. This is a poem with some more Utah landscape in it. It's called Below Mount Nebo, and you probably know that Mount Nebo is the mountain above Nephi, and it's also the mountain from which Moses was permitted to view but not enter the promised land. At the crossing, green swales, a clone of aspen shaking silver underleaf, scrub oak and columbine, cottonless cottonwood, yarrow like white fingers, speedwell with its pinched blue throat, monkshood clenched and penitent. Over the Hogsback to Sixwater, the river stemmed underground, skilled around slight tailings, an abandoned copper mine. Shaft collapsed and shallow. On a nearby branch, a painted bunting waited, covered by blue feathers, saucers of bright refraction. Its song was private and unintelligible. Oh, my leanness, oh, flat earth cracked and peeled, soil unraveled, field shirred and shadowing with wings. The plow is an eye. The black birds spoke out and downward, shadowing. My door, left unfastened at dusk, light coming in. The lightning bugs ascend, ignite. Kinetic plants front the dark. I think I currently have a thing with bugs. So this is a poem about moths. It's called Trouble, Fleet and Light of Wing. Because I've hung moth nets, the patio is filled with wings, papery, hushing in the dark, wings like shaved tinfoil, wings fulvous, wings frantic, bodies wing entire, a fan of veins, silk stretched between, patchworked, stitched by hairs. In doubled ranks they bend, from wing to wing, angelic, 100-eyed. The moth and meadow each night empties out, moths rising, bedizened and dizzy with pollen toward the lamp burning, inflamed, incandesced. Winter last year was long into spring. I dug the barn floor. Beneath bitter wood, white larvae tunneled through silage, blind jaws working, worming sulphurous trails, sumptuous nests hot, damp as summer's back. On air trails now they come, because I've hung moth nets. Ultraviolet against the canvas, they light on the sugaring, burring their wings. They cling and fluster on the nets, cluster, fracture, spasm on the bulbs. One touches flame, sizzle, tiny exodus of smoke, smell of naphtha. Lean in and look. Where they wing, tangle, lit against black sky, they are light-bearing, falling earthward, star-like, contagious in passion, star. The star is wormwood. I'll read another bug poem. Bugs are on my mind right now. This is a poem called Winnowing Song. Weevils? I'll tell you of weevils. My winter wheat worthless, brown-flecked, beweevilled. Into the cast iron skillet they skitter and hiss, stoked to a dither, skip the black surface dithyrambic. I clamp grains in Rubbermaid, wrap rice in vain cellophane. The field must be gaining against me, for morning finds fistfuls from pantry to parlor, insouciantly harrowing, corpulent, legion. I hear them all night, unwearying engines, the minute scrape of teeth, mandibles calcite and scratching like leaves thickly fallen in autumn in some deep-shadowed valley, leaves piled and corroding on the banks of Acheron, with progress unreal. My house uncomposed will be open to wind like a body uncased. Then will the weevils and I hunker down in the field, feeding on fallow, looking up where the roof used to be, at the fanning of trees, their leafy machinery threshing the stars. Probably don't need to tell this crowd. The Bible is a very rich treasure trove of metaphor. My favorite metaphor in the Bible is in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 8, where Israel is compared, where God tells Israel, you will be abandoned like a lodge in a garden of cucumbers. This makes no sense to me at all. So I decided to see if I could figure it out for myself. So this poem is called A Lodge in a Garden of Cucumbers. What spectacular mulch we hauled. Under the gloaming, the opaline midden sheened the pales. Blame the climate's heavy exhalations for sultry grass, beetles sultry in their mucus, and engorgement of cucumbers. They swell at dawn, slick in cucumiform splendor. Plump bunches stretch long into furrows, oodles in wanton vines, brave greens, bold greens, cocksure blossoms. Hours we doubled over rows, weeks coddling seedlings for this bonanza. But what rude hands will pluck, what barbarous chops devour these our only fruits, now you have deserted. Already shutters hang skewampus, the roof won't hold rain, windows faced with plywood, door nailed shut, everything nailed shut. And chicken wire can't keep out the vines that tendril through each crack. Can I behold my drear retreat, my sweet regret? My love, when you sup with your coterie, glows not of garden, say it the big con, nor reminisce your lodge. Rather, call me chump. This next poem has a slight story behind it. I was really interested in some language that surrounded the mining industry, but I didn't know enough about it to put it into a verse form. So I had my grandma take me on a tour of the place where she was born, which was a mining town and is now a ghost town called Mammoth. So this is the poem that grew out of that, and Mammoth didn't really work as a title, so I had to change it to Eureka. Let pass the burnt-out smithy smocked with rust. Let pass the pock-marked headframe canting at the ore dump. Let pass the tramway, unmaintained and vacant long of ore cars. Still this town would say disaster. Read it in the houses fronting Maine, hand-framed mortise tight to tenon, paint thinned beneath the weather, topaz to beige, gold to slate, 80 years empty. The tractor speaks it, standing at half-field. Harrow sunk to hubs in clay, its driver roused from song, Rock of Ages cleft for me, by shouts, set the brake and ran for buckets when the mercantile caught fire. It blackened half the town. And why rebuild? The Blackjack hole went bust in 1905. The Ajax Coy took 4 years more. Their veins worked out. We need never broach the bore, nor even venture near the shaft to know the mine. Its climate dusts the roads, hubs, harrow, houses, borne topside in bronchioles of men who, scraping for the load, unwitting excavated pressure and a dogged black despondence. Let our prospect be the graveyard, wherein lies Roland Peary, Halest Mucker, Cave in 96, and beside him Ab Peters. Be thou my bracer, Lord, whose bracings never faileth, each name alloyed. Their bones disintegrate to dirt, leaving nothing for the looter but the eerie ken of bleakness and a lapidary habit. It's a very full glass of water. Okay, this poem is called Pomegranates. Fabulous red desire, these could keep me here forever. Hours bent at the basin you spent, breaking the casings, burnished and woody, stripping off pulp, pith, and papery veil to reveal where they lay in tight rows, snug as eggs in a wasp's nest, as perennial bulbs beneath ice. Furious in the windowsill jar, they glint the glass scarlet, like garnets, your finger gone scarlet from touching, juiced in the scratch and the ransack. Flagrant you fumble a few to my lip. No fruit for romantics, this, the first sweet thrill, honeyed bacchanal, wet story of clustered orchards, inside an underworld of stone. So I heard this story from, I was listening to my dad and a friend of his talking about when they were younger and working on the farm, and it was time in the spring to castrate the lambs, and they didn't do it using little devices, they did it with their teeth. And this I thought was a pretty funky thing to find out. So this is called, and that process I discovered is called marking the lambs. So this poem is called Marking the Lambs. As crickets geiger up for spring, we corral the ram lambs. They stutter and dance against the fence, wheezing for the ewes. Down wince, down wretch, up one and flip his back to mud, me to sternum. The banded tail will black to wizen, prune off easy, but marking is all trespass. Thumb the soft belly to pop the scrotum out, then lunge and turn the mind away, teeth working to snap back and spit. I try not to taste, but I am all mouth, all salt blood and lanolin. I hear their bleatings through my tongue. They name it for the teeth marks on the belly, but when I speak tonight, my words will sputter and decay, and when try to say your name, I will pronounce it elegy. I usually have to explain the image at the heart of the next poem to my audience, but I don't think I need to do that here. It's called The Land Desolation. Myself unholy from myself unholy, seeking to withdraw, struck westward from Arcadia through sand washes to find myself rim-rocked above starvation. Tremendous the view of nothing thundered up, a basin scrubbed, sand-blasted, endlessly interpretable. I toiled the bluff, picked my way down Talus, shot the draw above the reservoir with its solitary derrick, pious, fervent in wide-caliber devotions. At the shore, the slattern water teemed, amuck with tadpoles, skeeters, moss of fecund density. In greasy rows, seagulls rimmed the banks to cram their gullets. Now I watch. They bow and rise, beaks open in the lunging, sharp beaks snap shut and open. They gorge. They are orthodox in stalking, until they struggle, stuffed, stagger into flight, a few sagging yards to vomit in the sand, a vanity of labor. Their scavenge is the only noise, the scavenge and the wind, and no one anyway to hear the wind and flimsy waves, this hiss and byword of water. This poem is called Voluptuary. 7 Mile Creek in the extravagance of June, a fullness of flowers, paintbrush and larkspur, bee flower and attendant bees, the cedars soft, The sun-fired pines forge filigree above the timberline. My ballerina sister on the riverbank poses, rod cocked to rearward, released and retracted, lying tripped terpsichorean by the weight of the fly. Her flybox cockeyed reveals damsels homemade, the emerging sparkle, the orange sunrise, the dark scintillator, and a green butt skunk. A ridiculous scene, tableau past cliche with verdure and sawing and blah blah blah. She hooks a splake, flips him to shore, yanks her knife open, swipes anus to jaw. With a finger inside, she slides guts, gore, and shit in a shining red pile. She dunks him, lets the stream clean the gash, chucks him to me for the ice bucket. And here the sucker punch of beauty. White vault of ribs in their arch to the spine, one red vein bulging faithfully skull to tail, red gills fragile, useless beneath the operculum, ordered like layers of vellum. Scales flake off and stick to my hand like glitter, like silver. In the Melon Colony, not stolen from Smashing Pumpkins. When you summered at the Melon Colony, did blue bottles fan the air even after dark? Were the fronds green, fanned out over the fruits as they lay? Was the soil pulpy, smelling of carbon? Did the rooks come home to roost on your shingles at night, and the owls drowse in the garden tress, burrowing softly to one another? Was there rot in the elm and dyspepsia in the drinking water? Did the moon ferret pebbles from beneath the needles on the forest floor? Did snails with their lustrous slime reclaim the pebbles? In the Melon Colony, it has been summer for years. I was reading this poem by John Berryman, different John. I thought it was pretty one-sided, and I thought that I had to write a reply to it. So I'll read his first, and then I'll read my reply. His is from the Dream Songs, it's number 4. Filling her compact and delicious body with chicken paprika, she glanced at me twice. Fainting with interest, I hungered back, and only the fact of her husband and 4 other people kept me from springing on her, or falling at her little feet and crying, "You are the hottest one for years of night." Henry's dazed eyes have enjoyed brilliance. I advanced upon, despairing, my spumoni. Sir Bones is stuffed, the world with feeding girls. Black hair, complexion Latin, jeweled eyes downcast, the slob beside her feasts. What wonders is she sitting on over there? The restaurant buzzes. She might as well be on Mars. Where did it all go wrong? There ought to be a law against Henry. Mr. Bones, there is. This poem is called The Hottest One for Years of Night. Darling, do not think for a moment I didn't notice you, an open oven across the room. The strain of aloofness buckled my knees. My bra dug in beneath my breast, tongue stiffened against my hostess' smile, wedding band throbbed. Joining with the natterers was like doing long division. I wanted you to call me Radiance, but you contemplated your spumoni, and the fever passed. Still, that fevered instant, weren't we both? This is called assignation. I am eating impatient apples, skins splitting, white meat browning at the surface. Milk is spoiling. When will you come? At the sacre coeur, metal doors ajar, metal bells rocking. They do not ring the hour. Hot air, blanched air is pooling over stiff, unquenchable grasses. When will you? The shore waits against the water. The gulf folds over itself with reaching. Light lapses on its way from the sun, catches on sight. The world whitens, filled for a moment with a singular light. a hesitation, a skip in the track, a misfire amid the day's gathering fire. When? I think snakes are really cool, and I wanted to try and write a poem that would act like a snake. And I was reading who was it, Montaigne, his essay on cannibals, or on cannibalism. He writes that the natives of the New World have this song that they sing in which they sort of, they try to call the snakes over to themselves so that they can learn to move like them. So I thought that was a pretty good idea. I ran with it. This is called Love Song. Stay, adder, startled from the spikenard by my step. Adder, stay, lissom syrinx, temptress of my underbrush. Scurry not so swiftly, though in scurrying you dazzle, scales scintillant under noon. Under noon I sought you in these grasses, dazzled by your splendor even deep in grasses, with my pencils sharpened into points of green and green. How sharp the emerald pencil and the sharper chartreuse to chart the deadly pattern of your skin, that sleek, defiant pattern, wreathing knots concentric as you writhe, or is it dark striations pulling taut? Your skin, so seeming simple, is in motion complicated. When I master its motions, I'll sew myself a dress of emerald and chartreuse, thin chemise with nodding wreaths to dozy contemplation. Then watch me work the garden. Down among grasses and spikenard, my whiplash glance, my side-wound sachet, who will resist? What powers in desire, with admirers fawning, chasing, charting? Nothing on earth could make me stay. This is another new poem. It's called Vanity of Vanities. Newer, I should say, at the speed that I write. You know, anything in the last 5 years seems recent. Starlings, little stars, I thought. But not these vermin, thieving dregs from the dog's bowl, marauding nesting eggs. And don't be fooled by beauty, wet the sheen upon the gullet, green the light beneath black feathers. I've been out back with a BB gun for hours, holding off their thrusts and stares, bald, hollow-bone shenanigans, to reach a clutch of unfledged larks. My routine altered. Now up at dawn, to ward against an early attack, now skipping lunch, crouched on the porch, and for some nostalgic Brit's snafu, I shoo these trash birds all afternoon. I'm addled, vexed, I yowl and flail, I lurch the yard to discover their hideout. My maddening, black-eyed adversary, my many-winged foe who in phalanges routs, despite calculations, my canniest strategy. For on the lawn now their black constellation bides unhurried until, spent, I go in. They'll eat the larks, which I have never seen, and do not know, and do not own. This is another sonnet that doesn't have a rhyme scheme, but you just have to trust me that it's a sonnet. And the last sentence is stolen from George Herbert. If you're going to steal, steal big. That's what I have to say. This is called Te Deum. Oh, for a tongue of fire, absolute, sublime, to crack the roof tiles, glaze sand, craze porcelain at a whisper. What fat tongue could lumber through the argument of this least leaf? Green, yellow-green to yellow, sheath to tip, the chemistry of autumn, slant the light across the underside, and wide the cells open to gasp, veins etch on green wax, crisp at the edge, a bare miniature aspen taut for winter, or a taproot struck with suckerings. Four-sided design, sequence and emblem, something understood. Oh, mouth club-footed, clay improvident, remain slack ever. Seeing is prayer. got to counteract the land desolation with this poem, The Land Bountiful. Moire under this lambent hour, salt extends to iron-gray mountains, encrusting the soil like granulated light. Amid the porticos of air, husks of brine shrimp shivvy on the breeze, curled and desiccate residue of a flood year. Here no incorrupt hyssop, no trees drooped in blessed fruit, no angels pillaring fire across the waste, only arches of sky and sky, only the mountains ore-filled at the horizon, only fingertips pickling, sweat vapored and filmed over skin, and brazen beneath this slanted hour, salt lustering to scrapyard mountains, plating the soil like amalgamated light. I think I'll read 3 more. Here's another sonnet, and that's the only title I've come up with for it so far. Yours is the face flays me recalling, yours the hand's imagined path along the spine, yours the throat frames my timbered paradise, yours the rake and yours the windrose, yours the wind sweeps through to blast me, yours the fretless neck of my desire, the fretful knock of my desire's echo, yours the secret junco in my breast, nights it beats me open, flutters east, to greet you rising with its brassy she. Traitor bird, to wing the windrose wormed with dawn, and yet return to hole up in my hollows nothing fed. No song but rasping, keen concatenation, yours. This is called Spring Again. The cardinals are in from the meadow. Wait, I have to stop. Stop. There's a word in this poem that you will not recognize, so I'm going to tell you about it. I always maintain that it's never the poet's responsibility to cater to the lowest common denominator among his or her readership, but sometimes there's not a dictionary handy, so it's better for me to, spend a couple seconds. There's a word in this poem which is turlough, and it's an Irish word. I was looking around for a word that would describe sort of the seasonal fluctuation of the water table, and there's not a single word that does that in English, but there is one in Irish. The word turlough means, it's a pun. It means dry lake, and it also means sort of sleeping lake, because in the winter, when Ireland's very wet, these lakes sort of appear in the low parts, and in the summer, when it gets drier, the lakes sort of disappear, so they're said to be sleeping. So that's the word that will crop up in the middle that you have probably not heard before. It's called Spring Again. The cardinals are in from the meadow, sparking in the thicket. Ever misplaced, ever immoderate of hue, they scuttle in the aspens. Sweep of wing, slight wake, leaves a clatter of silverlings. Bedewed, the thatch underfoot sponges. The spider's web spreads a screen of pearls. In a hollow uphill from the abandoned town, the water table tops the soil. Low the turlough in its occasional bed, runoff cold and day-shadowed, flat glass pressed into a slump of land. It will leave the meadow matted when it drains. Grasses strew the surface, mutinous grasses stretch and bow along the ridge. But you, no bird, no fuss of grasses, you, a leathern, a tight coil of fibers, a honey-throated shambles, you are exquisite. You are better left to the imagination, better in your traces, the timber pitched against the incline angle, post-hole stitching the edge of the pasture, a spill of granite at the quarry lip, your song wording cardinal, turlough, and town, and at the mouth of the canyon, the flowers cupped like pin-eye, ground littered with spilt seed pods, tender cotyledons cracked and agape, and me breaking off flowers, saying their names. Here is the blazing star. Here is the deer's ear, hope opening its tiny white symmetry. Here is the fireweed, green buds breaking to red, a bouquet of soldering irons. I promised you that you were going to get 2 paternosters today. So here's the second one. I saved it for last. This garden is a miracle. Aphids dropped with April, gorgeous emeralds with teeth. They preen against the petals, distill sweet sap to honeydew. Down bark, down fence post, tasselled branches dart and pull their braiding shadows, a slapstick of diffraction. Downwind, the barnstormers perfect their spectacle. Stiff cloth, wood prop, 2-cycle engine ascending like a prayer to flame out, hang breathless, cartwheel over, and power swooping earthward. It's all for show, the windswept scarf from 40s matinees, the smoky trail, the drama of the stall. The pilot streaks to level, tilts a greeting as he buzzes overhead, milks the throttle, rolls headlong into a spin, whining, frictive, the form of glory, and gloriously sunstruck. Seasonal, the ritual, pinching aphids as I kneel upturned, squinting sunward for the sleek, daredevil flight, for the promise of the climb, of sunlit wings, of plain things charged and fulgent, of one perfect performance of earth as it is in heaven. Thank you.
For a couple of questions.
Yes, right there. Is that Eric?
Yeah, hi.
I can't see anything.
Pardon?
I can't see anything.
Well, you guessed right, it's me. I have a question. One of the things that I always really appreciate in literature and poetry is when the author takes the time to really know what they're talking about. If they decide to talk about mining or gutting a fish, for example. And it made me wonder, you obviously knew a lot about that. Which came first here, the chicken or the egg? Did you say, hey, I want to write a poem about mining, I'm going to go learn the esoteric vocabulary of mining? Or did you have the opportunity to learn that and then think, hey, I'm going to write a poem about it?
Yeah, usually the vocabulary comes first. I'm entranced by a word and I think, that is a cool word, that's worthy of exploring more. And so I figure out like the way it's used and the context that I use, and I end up spending a lot of time in weird books in the library. I remember when I was doing the poem about the moths, the hanging moth nets, I spent like 2 weeks in the Q section of the library, which is where the books about moths are. So yeah, the word attracts me, and then I have to find out to make sure that I'm telling the truth, you know, that I'm speaking accurately about the thing that I'm trying to represent. So, yeah.
I'm just curious about your writing process. Like, what is your first draft like? Is it as dense as your poems are, or denser, maybe?
It is as dense. The first draft, at this point in my life, I've sort of learned what my weaknesses are, and so by the time it gets down on paper, it's pretty close to the final version and pretty dense. I end up sometimes squeezing out a couple of unnecessary words like articles and ands and things that don't really feel unnecessary until I start stepping on the poem. But I really do, as I was saying to Eric, start with an interest in a word. A particular word draws me for some reason, and that's the thing I write toward. I uncover the words rather than try to. It never happens that I'm trying to like get at some point and I'm writing toward it. I let it sort of coalesce and develop through my my research into language and into the stuff that language leads me to look at. So, yeah, was there a hand over here? Yeah.
Why did you decide to come and teach at BYU?
I need snow. Come on. Because, let's see, why did I come out to decide to teach at BYU? I'll be honest with you. It's partly because of snow and mountains. It's partly because my parents are nearby and my son needs to hang out with grandparents. And it's partly because when I was interviewing here, one of the professors in the department, Jackie Thursby, came up to me and said that she thought that BYU needed somebody like me for its girl students. So, and that made sense to me. That was persuasive to me. So, plus, you know, all my stuff is here. You know, Eureka, Mount Nebo. I need to get more research done.